Okay. So, like primarily, I think uh, we will be talking about environment art and asset pipeline and those things, I believe, right? So, I was like kind of wondering if we are going to have any kind of interaction or not, but I think it will be a little bit of problem given this is like there is quite like I am having bit of problem with receiving the audio on your end. In any case, like I will be talking about the asset pipelines and all that. So I'll begin by sharing my screen. Okay, so first of all, like you can, I hope my screen is visible, right? Okay. So you can find some of my work in my ArtStation page. So, and for preparation for this event, I have been like creating a small environment, like something that I quickly cooked up just to like give a short introduction on how exactly we do things. So, like little bit of about myself, like all the Abhishek sir has already introduced me, but so I started working with Unreal Engine back in 2016. I think it was 5.14 back then. So at that time, I used to work as a 3D artist and usually for, outside clients, for small indie studios and some outsourced work as well. And from there, I eventually went on to become environment artist and I joined AnyBrain. Like I'm not sure if you have heard about that studio or not. It's located in Pune and they usually work for uh, Hollywood movies. Like we used to get projects from Netflix, and usually Unreal Engine was primarily used over there as something related to pre-visualization. I hope you have heard of the term pre-visualization. Like it's the initial concept stage of movies, and also sometimes also for background preparation, because you might have heard of the term called as virtual production. So for virtual production, we used to create environments. And currently, I am working as senior Unreal developer. So right now, my primary job role is integrating virtual reality things or coding gameplay mechanics. So for that, like primarily we use C++. Like Unreal Engine does come with the like just for curiosity and for my knowledge, I would like to know how many of you are aware about Unreal Engine or have used it in some respect. Has any one of you used Unreal Engine? Okay, so okay, okay, got you. So like if you see the recent developments, Unreal Engine has been pushing really hard for sectors like virtual production and product visualization. You may have heard about these terms at least, right? Like if you have like interest in advertisements or film creation, you might have heard about terms like virtual production. So because of that, Unreal has been working on technologies such as Nanite and Lumen. So it is something that you should be aware about if you want to enter this industry at some point. So the tools that we will be using today will be Blender primarily because like it's a free application and a lot of times I do work for side projects, so for that I need something that is easily accessible. And other thing that we are going to use is Substance Painter and Substance Designer. So again, for my knowledge and interest, I would like to know like if you have used Blender, if you are aware about Blender. Okay, okay, so yeah. So Substance Painter is actually available on Steam. That is why I have the license for it, and that is why I prefer using these tools, which are, at least somewhat affordable. Apart from this, you also have a free alternative for Substance, and it is Quixel's. I believe it's called Quixel Mixer, but like I'm not that much familiar with it. I hope once again I would like to ask if you are aware about Substance Painter and Designer, have or have used it. Okay. Okay, okay, got it. So, few key points that we will be talking about today. Like I was just making list of few things that some keywords that I would like to possibly discuss. Now, these are more gaming related things, something that you may or may not be interested in too much. And this one is primarily for asset pipelines and similar kind of things. So what we are going to talk about is, let's first go to the modeling side of things. If you have seen Blender or used it at some point, the interface might be familiar, and I have few extensions that I personally like to use. In case you want to know that, do let me know. So usually when it comes to game assets, you may have heard of something called as low poly models. Like in games we have very strict restriction on, like, not just games, we are talking in general about AR, VR, and all those things. So one thing that usually we need to keep in mind is optimization of our assets. Okay, so optimization is a very complex term. Usually I have seen people just wondering that optimization means that we use low poly models and we use low resolution texture, but it is obviously not that simple. Optimization is a very complex subject, and especially when you are working with tools like uh, virtual reality headsets, you will realize that if you make any kind of even mediumly large environment, you will have very severe performance issues, or you will need very powerful systems to run that, simply because virtual reality devices, they have two screens, one for each eye, so rendering cost is literally double on that. Okay, so even more like virtual reality headsets, their rendering cost is literally double for, like, when compared to PC games, since on PC game you have just one screen that has to render. So, like, from what I understand, you all are primarily working with VR and AR, if I'm not wrong, right? Is like, again, out of curiosity, is any one of you interested in games or anything like that, like game pipeline? Okay, 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 understand. Hmm. Right. Okay, I understand. So let me throw a few terms at you. Okay, and I would like to know your answer for this. So first is level design, environment art, technical art. Okay, I hope these are visible. So I would like to ask you this question, like, what do you understand by these terms: level design, environment art, and technical art? Anyone would like to try to answer this? No idea. Okay, no problem. I will elaborate. So here is the thing, like, if you are working, doesn't matter if it's movie, or you're making an environment for, let's say, a small product visualization thing, or you are making an environment for a large game, okay, whatever it is. So there are three key fields that you should know about. First is the level design, the second one is the environment art, and finally the technical art. So level design is primarily done by, you know, like surprise, they are called as level designers. Okay. So level design is basically when you block out your environment. Like I will show one example, like something that, you know, I was trying to do. And I will also take some examples of, some decently big games. Now, why are we talking about these things? It is because since we are talking about the entire pipeline, I thought I should make all these things clear. I'll just quickly go over the environment. In the meantime, I'll just search for uncharted level design. So I hope you have heard about 80 level. This is a gaming related publication. So this is what a level designer comes up with. Like I hope you have heard about, at least seen to some extent, this game. This is called Uncharted. So what level designer does is they define the gameplay space. Like, what kind of experience the player is going to have, where the assets should be placed, how the enemies should be placed, what kind of flow the level is going to have. So this is a field very closely related to, you can say, human psychology and emotions and feelings, like what kind of shapes and how to frame a shot, like what is visually pleasing, and what kind of light and color combination triggers what kind of emotions within a person. uh, I'll just So a small scene that I was working on, this is what is called as level design. Basically, you have these grid shapes which are all of equal lengths. Okay, like I think each one of them is 1 meter or 100 centimeter. Like Unreal Engine uses centimeter scale, so each square is 100 centimeter by 100 centimeter. So with that, we can get a general scale of the environment, and then we can get a feel of what kind of experience the player is going to have. Okay, like we, as a level designer, your job is to define what kind of things the player will see. Like if you imagine when you first see this scene, like what the player will do. Like let's say I will pick up this weapon, and the first thing that I want to do is climb this nearby tower. So so that I can get some good idea about what I'm going to face. Okay. And from here we can see what are called as the leading lines. So these lines, they are very subtly pointing towards things. Like if you see, we have these lines, and these lines slowly guide the player towards one point of interest. Like this radar tower can be a small point of interest, and once again we have some leading lines which are pointing towards this tower at the distance. Okay, so this is something that usually what level designer does. Now again, like I'm not an expert in level design, this is something that I've been trying, but just to give you an idea. Okay, so this is the job of a level designer. Next comes the environment art, and that is where you convert all these blockouts into actual assets. Like here we are getting a good idea about what kind of shapes and forms that we want to put in our environment. Now as an environment artist, you will be, like usually there will be a 3D team who will provide the assets. So an environment artist will be laying out those assets based on uh, the guides placed by the level designer, basically. I guess so. This is where I'm trying to do some environment art, basically creating a building. And again, these are all placeholder material because I did this really quick just for preparation for this. Now what I'm going to do is talk little bit about technical art before proceeding forward. So I hope level design and environment art are pretty much clear what they mean. So technical art is basically a bridge between a programmer and an environment artist. So technical artist will create tools, shaders, materials, and all those things which will help a level designer or environment artist do their job. So technical artist usually creates the pipeline for things. Let's say a technical artist will define what kind of texture format we will be using, what kind of UV layouts we will be using, what should be the minimum textile density that our assets should have. So that is the job of technical artist. They will define all the pipeline related things. They will create tools, shaders for the environment artist. So for that, for technical artist job role, you should be very good at maths and programming as well as art. Okay, so a technical artist is a combination of multiple things. It's a very complicated and a very high paying job role. I hope these three are clear. Like if anyone has any question, you can ask. Otherwise, we will move forward. Okay, so right. So now what we are going to do is like talk about assets. Okay, so whenever you are creating your environment or whatever, so primarily, like at least how I believe there are two primary types of assets. Okay, one is called as tileable or modular assets. Okay, and the other one are called as unique assets. Right. So whenever you are making an environment, you will be working with these two primary types of assets, and how you make them, how you present them have very unique and different types of workflows. Okay. So first thing that we are going to do is talk about modular assets. Okay. So modular assets are those which are designed in such a way that you can place them multiple times. You can duplicate them and place them multiple times, and they will all snap together. Let me just see. Okay, so let's say I have this window. I will place it in the scene, and if I duplicate it, you will see that this every time I will duplicate this, it will fit perfectly, and then there are no seams in between. They will all appear constant, and the same thing goes on the other side as well. Okay, like if I place them vertically, this is what a modular asset is. Okay, so something that you would duplicate and place them multiple times. Now this is a workflow that is not just unique to games. Nowadays a lot of movies are also picking up this workflow, simply because this way you can save a lot of texture space, and then it also reduces rendering times. Like if you look at any kind of movie pipeline from previous years when they did not use modular workflows, I mean any big company would have probably used them, but in movies you will see it is very common to use extremely high resolution textures like 8K, 16K textures. Now what the issue with that is, it will blow out the rendering times extremely high. Like a single frame for a movie can take days to render, if it's a huge complex movie. So you can imagine what the problem with that is. A low budget movie is not able to afford any kind of good environment, simply because they do not have the hardware to render such expensive assets. Okay, and in movie the quality is everything. So lot of movies have recently started picking up this modular approach. Now you will see one problem with that is it looks all same. Now there are different methods of breaking up this tiling or repeating pattern. If we get time, we will talk about all those as well. But basically, this is what a modular asset is. Okay. So something that is like, you can easily duplicate and place around. And next we come to the unique assets. Now, unique assets are those which we do not want to tile. Okay. Like for example, this door. Okay. Again, something that I'm still working on, not a final, so don't judge it too hard. But the thing is, the non-modular or unique assets, they are not made for tiling. Like obviously, I can duplicate and place this around as many times as I want, but they are not supposed to be like tiled or anything. Like how we are doing for this specific asset. Doors will be placed in very specific places. So again, I'll launch Substance Painter, and while it opens, we will talk little bit about you know the different types of workflows that we use when creating these specific assets. Again, this is not a final work, it is still work in progress, so like I'm not happy with the colors and stuff, but anyway. So uh, sorry, do we have any questions? I hope the i hope the pace is fine. In case we are moving too fast or something is not making sense, please let me know. Okay, I think we can continue then. So let us talk about tie-level assets first. Okay. I hope you are like good enough familiar with Blender because I'll be moving little bit fast on this. So one thing very important about tie-level assets is something called as grid obedience. Okay. So what grid obedience is basically, we will make things in such a way that they fit in a grid. Okay, fit or tile in a grid. So if you see this wall, this is exactly 4 meter by 4 meter. Okay, like we can check this in Blender. So again, Blender is using centimeter scale. I'll just open this up. This length is in meters. Okay, so each square is 1 meter. Each of this, thick white line is 1 meter. So this wall is 4 meter wide and 4 meters tall. Again, we can also check this if I create a plane and move it somewhere near this. Rotate is something like this. And what I'm going to do is enable the text info. And we can see that this is 2 meters. It's kind of off, right? So this length is 4 meters and same on the height. This is now 4 meter by 4 meters. So whenever we make tie level assets, we will ensure that this is fixed on a grid, like so that we will have no problems when we are tiling this. And ideally, it is preferred to be in powers of two, but like you are not anyway forced to do that. Like for my assets in this one, these are actually, I believe these are 3 meter by 3 meter because I tested and 4 meter was too high. Okay, so this is 3 meter by 3 meter, all the assets. So yeah, even if I make this, you know, something like this, once again, this should be grid of like this should follow the grid very properly. Like I will be able to move and snap these without any problems. Okay, so this is what grid obedience is. And next thing that we will talk about is, I should not have deleted this. Next thing that I will talk about is the UVs. Okay, we can access the UVs from this data panel. And one thing that you should know about is that every asset can have multiple UV channels. I hope like you have this basic idea. So a typical game asset that we make for Unreal Engine will have three UV channels. Okay. And now each channel has a specific purpose and will hold a very specific kind of map. Okay. So for that also we follow a specification, and this is let me check if I have already written. Right. I already have written it. So our UV channel one, or in case of Unreal Engine, it treats the first UV channel as UV channel 0. Okay, so in Unreal, the first index is always 0. So we start from 0, 1, 2. Okay, so in the UV channel 0, we will store something called as the unique unwrap. Now, what is unique unwrap? Let's see. I'm going to delete all this, take this one, and I'm going to just extrude it so that this wall has some kind of thickness. So this is, let's say, our basic wall, okay, that we want for our game environment. Now, typically, how you will UV unwrap this is like, I'm not sure your method, but at least how we learned it initially was something kind of like this. Okay, so this is what this UV may look like, but as you can see, this is wasting a lot of UV space. Again, we cannot do too much to fix it, but what I am going to do is just uh, make all of these faces have seams. And this is because, this is going to be a wall. We may not see these faces anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to unwrap this, and this occupies more UV space. As you can see, these faces have much better resolution. Like this is called as the 0 to 1 space. I hope you're aware of that. So in 0 to 1 space, we want to give our UV maps as large possible space as possible. Okay. So like as big as possible without, you know, breaking anything. So this is what is called as unique unwrap, where each of our UV island, or every face of our object is occupying a unique space in this 0 to 1 space. Okay, so as you can see, there are no overlaps. So each of this face is occupying a unique space. So this is what is called as unique unwrap, and we will keep this on UV channel 0 for reasons that we will soon see. Okay. Next, we have this UV channel 1 where we will keep the tiling unwrap. Okay. And for that, I will do one thing. I will assign a material to this. Let me give this brick material. Okay. And what I'm going to do is duplicate this asset And you will see the problem that we are having right now. We can clearly see the seams, okay, for all of these. And also our UVs are rotated, which is not ideal. We will fix that eventually. But the point is we have visible seams between these pieces. And as you can imagine, this is a problem. We cannot have visual seam like this. And if you see all of these assets, there are no visible seams between our meshes. Okay, like nowhere you will be able to spot a seam. So what we need to do is we need to have a UV unwrap where, you know, which hides all these seams. So for that, we will come to the second UV channel. I'll make this the rendered one. I'm going to delete all this. And this time what I'm going to do is unwrap this. Okay. So we have this face, and in order to make this styling, what we need to do is we need to make sure that, you know, this is filling up this entire UV space. I hope you are aware that, you know, if anything goes outside this 0 to 1 space, it simply starts styling back, like, you know, this this part that we have will simply wrap around over here, like whatever is here will wrap towards us. And to visualize that, what I'm going to do is apply something that allows us to see it. So if you look here, let me rotate this as well. Okay, so we have these checkers B1, B2, A1, and A2. And if I move it on X axis, or how we call this as U dimension, U axis and V axis. Okay, so this is why this is called as the UV space. So on up, it's, I think in up it's V, and on horizontal axis it's U. So if I move this on the U direction, you will see this will just, you know, start repeating whatever is over here. So based on this idea, we can guess that, you know, if we fill up this entire UV space, something like this, and I'm going to rotate it. So now what will happen is if I duplicate this face, and once again I'm going to apply the brick texture that we had. Now we don't have any more visible seams. Okay, and this is called as the tileable unwrap. Okay, so what this allows us to do is make our asset tileable so that there are no visible seams. There are a lot of, like, you know, there are some additional work here, but we'll go to that. I hope this much is clear. Like, if you have any questions, please let me know, or should we move forward? Yeah, in case, like, you know, there are any issues, please. Short break. Okay, 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 sir. Okay, well, okay, right. So we have the other side of the face as well. And what we usually do a lot of times for this is that we use this project from view bounds option for UV unwrapping faces like these. Okay, when we want to project all of these faces into these bounds. Now, again, for this asset, we can just use the regular unwrap and it should work just as fine. But you will see that when we have something more complex, at that time we will have issues. Like, let's say we have this asset and we want all of these corners, which will be like, which are the boundary where, we want the tiling to happen. So as you can imagine, if we use regular unwrap, this may not work. So for this, we will use the project from view a lot of times, and then, make sure that all of these are properly aligned. Anyway, like, I'll just continue with this asset for now. We'll take the other side as well and do the same thing, project from view bounds. And while doing this, I would like to have the checker material applied, because on this one we can check the tiling, but we cannot see whether, our UVs are flipped or not. So for that, the checker is the better option. Okay, and as you can see, this one is flipped. So I'm going to take this and let me use the mirror horizontal, and this is now proper. As for the edges, we are not that much concerned because, these won't be too visible anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to unwrap this, and this is called as tileable unwrap. And you will see the thing here that unlike the unique unwrap, our UV islands, our UV faces are overlapping with each other. Okay, like, there is a very severe overlap. I see a small problem here, and this one is for whatever reason not occupying the full space. So let me just do a fill. By the way, this is the text tools add-on for Blender. Like, Blender does require a lot of add-ons to, you know, give the full feature, you know, if you want to have the full proper experience. So I would recommend getting this text tools, UV toolkit, UV packer. Like, if you're interested in what all add-ons I use, you can let me know. So what we have now is basically our object unwrapped with two different sets of UV maps. And I see that I have made a mistake. I did not see which UV channel was selected. So this one became the tile level unwrap. So what I'm going to do is I need to change this back, because, our first UV channel should be the unique, like based on the parameters that we have set up, like based on the specification that we have set up here. So let's quickly fix that. What I'm going to do is to delete this one and duplicate this. So now this one is the tiling unwrap. Sorry, yeah, tileable unwrap, and I'll select this one and just do a regular unwrap on this. Right. So now our first UV channel is unique packing, and our second UV channel is tileable packing. And last but not the least is the third UV channel. And what we use this for is something called as light map UVs. So any game engine, whether it is Unity or Unreal, actually I haven't worked with Unity too much, so I'm not 100% sure if or to what extent they use light maps. But in Unreal Engine, we definitely do use light maps for baked lighting. So as you know, games have to run on real time, so we cannot calculate lights a lot of times we cannot calculate lights at the runtime unless we are using some, complex tricks like sign distance fields and all those things. Again, not going to go into too much detail, but ideally for any kind of game environment, what we use something called as the baked lighting. So what that does is during the compilation of the game, we will fix the lighting and bake all that light information into a special kind of UV called as the light map UVs, so that we don't have to calculate lights during the runtime. So for that, Unreal has something called as static lighting. Static lights and stationary lights, they bake light information into any mesh that is marked as static. Okay, we are going to come to that eventually. For now, all you need to know is that you need to know what baked or static lighting is. Okay, so in order to store that information, we have the light map UVs. Now, light map UVs are again very unique. Okay, so for that, what I'm going to do is first of all do a regular pack. Okay, and in light map, Unreal has a huge issue in which what happens is there is a lot of light bleed. So what happens is light information from one UV space will start bleeding into the other UV space. So in order to fix that, we use a decently large padding. Okay, let's say actually zero point 0.4 maybe too much. Let's say uh, again too much, 0.05 maybe, something like that. Like we need to have some large gap between UV faces. Okay, so that there is no overlap and there is no accidental light bleeding. So this is something that we need to take care about. And another thing is that for light map UVs, we have to ensure that the most important faces have the maximum amount of UV space. Okay, so as I can see, these faces may or may not be visible to the player because these are interior faces. So what I'm going to do is scale them down, rotate them, and then throw them somewhere around a corner and put them all in a straight line so that they don't occupy too much of the space. And then what I'm going to do is take all these major faces, and again this may look weird because for regular UVs we do not usually do this, but like I said, for light map UVs we want the maximum resolution possible for most important faces. Okay, so I stretch these faces so that they occupy the most space. It is because light map UVs are usually extremely small in resolution, like 256 by 256. So we need to make sure that the faces which are very important, they are occupying the most UV space. So these are the three UV channels that we usually keep. Okay, I mean, at least this is something that I personally use, and whatever studios or indie games or whatever I have worked with, they use this or very similar workflow. Okay, like this kind of workflow may change from studio to studio, or what kind of game or what kind of scene they are working on. Maybe it's a virtual production scene with fully dynamic lights and they don't need the light map UVs. This is very much possible. Okay, but this is something that you should be aware about, at least, so that in case, like there is a condition where they want to keep the optimization in mind, or they want baked lighting. Let's say it's a VR scene. So for VR scene, I would argue that you should always use baked lighting because VR is so expensive for rendering anyway. Let's quickly fix this one. I see that these faces are rotated, so I'll just rotate these. Okay, so why we keep the first UV channel as the unique pack? It is because we may want to take this into Substance Painter to paint some masks for this. Okay. So for that, we have something called as the RGB mask blending. Okay. So in order to break up tiling or, add any kind of extra details, we use RGB mask blending, in which we will have specific masks that we will create for our assets. And inside Unreal, we can use these masks to layer on additional details, whatever it is, whether it is for breaking up tiling or, give it more interesting look other than, whatever this is. Like this looks very dull, so we need additional information on this. Okay, like not just bricks. You can imagine, there will be dust collecting, or maybe you want painted bricks and all that. So in order to create the variation, we use primarily two methods. First is RGB mask blending, and second one is vertex painting. Okay, so I think in the next session we can discuss about both of these techniques. Okay, mask blending and vertex painting, and also talk a little bit about unique assets as well. Now we have 8 more minutes. I would like to, you know, ask if whatever we have discussed so far, whether, that made any sense or not, or, if you have any questions or anything like that. Like, was this clear enough? Did you learn something new? Yes. Mhm. Okay. 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 Understood. Okay, sir. I do have one module on VR that I prepared. So I should have them. Like, give me a moment. I'll just look for it. Like, if you want to know about, sorry, virtual production. Okay. Give me a second. Uh, I'll just stop presenting for a moment. Uh, like, in the meantime, can you, I have one question. Like, what should I cover for the next session? Like, the audio was not entirely clear. So, like, what kind of things I should focus on? Okay. Uh-huh. Okay, got it. Okay, okay, okay. Right. Okay, that would be actually very simple because Unreal does have, ready-made VR templates, so it's very easy to set up and all that. Okay. Hmm, hmm. Yeah. Okay. 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 Got it. Hmm, got it. Okay. In that case, I will just open up one artwork that we had created back at AnyBrain for virtual production. So I'll just share my screen again, and I hope this does not start compiling shaders. So, and you actually also have been able to see after a very long time. So maybe the compiled shader data is lost. So like this will take some time. In the meantime, if you have any, we can discuss few things like uh, you all already have VR devices, right? So I just want to ensure a few things. So VR is very, how do I say, heavily dependent on programming skills. Okay. Like basic template is already there. You don't have to do anything there. Everything is already set up for you. But anything you want to do outside that, you will have to learn programming. Okay. And Unreal's programming, again, there are two parts to it. First is C++, the other one is Blueprints. Blueprints is comparatively easy, and I don't think we have time for teaching, or I don't think any of you are interested in learning programming either. So we will see how the standard template is set up for VR. Again, you literally don't have to do anything for it. Okay, it's already set up for you. All you have to do is just import your scene, and you're good to go. Okay, so this is one of the artwork scenes. Like once it opens up, we will be able to see. So for that, what we did was we created a stylized kind of RPG kind of environment. I'll actually show it in the art station. Okay, like this is what we created. Now, again, for this, we followed very strict principles for optimization because this is a VR scene and it's pretty large. Okay, like once it opens up, you'll be able to see this is a pretty large world that you can explore in VR. Okay, and what issue that was causing was that it's very expensive to render in VR. Okay, so for that, either you should have very powerful hardware, like good PCs with latest GPU and all that. Otherwise, you won't be able to open it. Okay, now this is a stylized scene, as you can see. So, like, our art director, he came up and said, we need to create a stylized scene in VR just to, something like a student's cartoon or something like that. Okay. So this was the result for it. Uh, Again, I don't have a VR device and I won't be able to demonstrate this in VR, but, we can run around in third person. So, like, if you have any kind of downloaded assets, or if you have created anything by your own self as well, you need to know how to optimize things for VR. Okay, and maybe we will quickly go over some of those things. And like, one more question from my end is that, uh, like, you all, from what I understand, you want to learn how to implement assets in VR. Like, do I understand that correctly? Right. So, like, what exactly is the purpose? Do you want to create a environment, like you want to be an environment artist who creates things for VR environment that player can play around? Is it something like that? Because based on that, I will decide what to go ahead with. Please let me know. Like, do you see yourself as environment artist creating assets for VR? Is it something like that?
Anyone is there who
Yes. And no need to call me sir, please. Like, okay, okay, okay. So, like, I'm trying to understand what kind of industry you are going for, right? So, what you told me, according to that, I believe it's something related to pre-visualization industry. Okay, something that kind of, not exactly, but kind of I worked in. Like in Anibrain, it was a mix of everything. Like, it was an experimental department, and unfortunately, it got shut down because they couldn't figure out exactly what they were going for. So, uh, like, if you're talking about pre-visualization, in that case, you should know animation, like, nicely. You should know how to do animation, use the sequencer in Unreal. Okay. Again, like, that is not exactly my expertise. Like, I was environment artist. Okay. Like, animation is not something that I'm very good at. So for that, in fact, like, I am like so bad at animation that I use a tool called as Cascader. Have you heard of Cascader? It's a kind of AI based tool that helps you in animation. It's an interesting thing. You should check it out. Anyway, please let me know more. Like, up, what about the other person? Sorry, I didn't get your names. Okay. Sorry, come again. Concept art. Okay. So what, like once again, something, not once again, but something you should know about is don't focus on too many industries at the same time. Like have a, how do I say it? A focused goal that, this is what I'm going to do. Like if it's either a concept artist or animator or pre-visualization, you cannot be all of them at the same time. Like like when you step out of NID, where do you see yourself going? You are open to anything. Uh, like the when you are talking to a recruiter in studio, they will ask you what department you are applying for. You cannot say versatile. That is like even they will be confused. No, I understand. Like when you're learning, learn everything. That's good enough. But portfolio should be like here. While I am here, I have only 2 more hours with you, so I need to say whatever I tell you has to be very focused, right? So I will tell you, like, even when you are learning, you do learn a lot of things, right? Like keep those in mind, but make portfolio for one thing. Like not a jack of all trades. Okay, understood. Okay, okay. I understand. So that is actually good if you are like you are an animator. Again, there are, I won't say there are like less animators in India, but there is a definite lack of something called as technical animators. Okay, so technical animators is something that studios do look out for. So what a technical animator is basically, how to work with Unreal Engine tools and integrate animation into that, like animation blueprints, control rig, uh, procedural things, procedural animation. So that is something that you can look out for. Actually, you will have to do that to some extent. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. You two, I understood, like animator. What about the others? Like, are there any? I know you are in university right now, so like what year you are in right now, if I may ask? Okay. 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 So general things. Okay. Okay. Understood. Understood. So I'll just go then more general in this case. It's 11:42. Like they want to go for break or something right now, or like. Okay, sir. No issues. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so I'll just share my screen and yeah, the scene has finally opened. So there is a few things that I will talk about since uh, last time we saw how we can create the assets and set up those whatever. So for now, what I'm going to do is first let's just play the scene and see. So as of right now, we can explore this in third person because I don't have a VR device at my home. So, but once you have a VR device, I'll just show you how you can set up any scene that you have to work with VR. Okay. So as you can see, this is a decent. I won't say this is a large environment, but for VR device, there is a lot of open space. So there is a lot of things to render on the screen. Usually, what people will do is like if you take any kind of example scenes from VR, there is a lot of confined spaces, like closed off space. There is a lot of things that are blocking your view so that your system doesn't have to render things that are too far. So again, this scene was made to be run on PC with a VR device attached to it. So in our previous studio, we had HTC Vive. So like apart from that, Meta Quest 3 does support standalone VR because it is it has a storage in it. So VR, the Meta Quest 3 it runs on Android platform. Okay, so what we do is for Meta Quest we will create Android build, but for non-standalone VR projects like this one, which does require a dedicated PC to run, for that we can use yeah. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah, so basically this is what I have for now, and what I'm going to do is uh, just I'm going to add a content pack to this, and Unreal Engine does have virtual reality template. So what I'm going to do is import this, virtual reality template. So I'll just select it and then click on add to project. And that should, you know, implement this. Now this is saying that, certain plugins need to be enabled. So what I'm going to do is just click on enable missing. Okay. And after that, this will ask for restart. I hope it doesn't start building shape. Yeah. So now we have a VR template in our scene. So there are a few things you should know about how Unreal Engine works because this is primarily a game engine. So there will be some game related terms that are associated with it. But we don't have to create too much from scratch in order to, implement the VR pawn, as it is called. Okay. So what currently I have open right now, this is called as a level, okay, level or a map. Okay, so every map has an associated game mode attached to it. So we can check this. If I click on this, this drop down, you will see there is something called as world override and there is something called as project setting. Okay. So in project setting, there is a game mode selected and we can also override the game mode for a specific one. Now what basically game mode is that it just assigns the default controllers and all those things. Okay. So no need to know too much. All we need to know is that in order to play as the VR on, we just need to assign the correct VR game mode. Okay. So I'll click over here and from the world override, I can do a select game mode class. And since I have imported the VR template, I should see the VR game mode over here. So if I click on this, now if I click on play, this should spawn the VR controller. Something that won't work in my case because I'm on a laptop, not on a VR device. Like there is no VR device connected to it. But if I hit play, I cannot move around anymore because this has spawned the VR controller for me, the VR pawn for me. So in order to preview this in VR, if you have a VR device connected and Unreal Engine has detected that VR device, this VR preview button should. I hope I'm audible again. Yeah, where did the conversation break off? What was I saying? Uh, okay, so basically you don't want, you know, the person who will use your, like if someone wants to run your game or VR thing that you created, you don't want them to install Unreal Engine first, right? So for that, we have to create a build, okay, or package our project. So for that, you need to have Visual Studio installed. You need to have Windows SDK installed. Again, you will find very good guides for it in the Epic Games official website. Okay, so I won't go too in depth into that, but for creating a build for Windows, you need to have the Windows SDK. So otherwise, you will see this warning sign displayed because I don't have SDKs for Android, iOS, Linux, or whatever. And yeah, if you are wondering if you can create iOS build or not, well, for that you will need to have a Mac system. Like you cannot create iOS build on a Windows PC. Okay. So I already have everything set up. So what I can possibly do is set the build settings to one of these three: debug, development, or shipping. So shipping is the ideal one. Shipping is the like build in which it does not have any debugging facilities. Like Unreal Engine does provide some debugging loggers and you know crash analysis features. So all those things are usually disabled in the shipping build. So shipping build is the fastest and it will be the smallest in size when you create the build because it will remove all the unnecessary content. Okay, and what I'm going to do is just one more thing, like you can override your game mode from here as well as from the world settings tab. You can open this by clicking on Windows and go to world settings. So I'm going to choose the third person game mode for now, and we can just play this and see what kind of problems we can possibly face. Like I was just testing this scene, s- and there is one small issue here. I'm just finding the layer. So let's say you created some asset or you downloaded an asset, whatever, and you see there is this weird issue in which you cannot go past certain things, even though there is nothing there. So one thing you need to know is game engines, they use simplified meshes which are called as collisions in order to detect you know any kind of physics input, any kind of physics interaction. So basically my player is walking over here, it is using physics in some form. So there is a collider here which is stopping me from going across. So I'll just show you, in case your assets or whatever assets that you get, they give you this kind of issue. So I can just click on that asset and go to edit. This one is a blueprint asset, but what we are looking for is the static mesh associated with it. So static mesh is basically like any 3D model that you have. So this can happen to your assets as well. Okay, so this is something important that you should know. So in order to see the collision, this is the static mesh editor. Okay, like whenever you bring in any asset, whether your or downloaded, whatever, what you can do is you can see what kind of collision this asset has. So in order to see that, I'm going to click on show and then click on simple collision. Okay, so you can see this is the collision mesh that Unreal Engine is using for detecting physics interacting with this. And as you can see, this is causing the problem because even though we cannot see it, but Unreal is treating this entire thing as a large blocker. So if you are creating a scene for your portfolio, or let's say a small internal project, what you can simply do is you can delete this collision mesh that is there by clicking and pressing delete, and you can scroll down, and where it says collision complexity, I hope this is visible. Instead of project default, what I can do is use complex collision as simple. Okay, this is the easiest method that a lot of people will do for their simple meshes. This is not an optimized workflow, but again, something that just works for your small scenes. Okay, so what you will see now is I can just walk across this without any issues. Again, so something you should know that Unreal Engine does try to generate collision on its own, but sometimes it will fail, and it will generate these weird collisions that do not work properly. So you need to manually go in and fix the collision for your assets. And I'll just quickly show the other method, and then I'll just set it back to project default. And from collision, I can just click on add box simplified collision. And what this will do is just add a simple box collision for us. Okay, and I can scale this down and place it where I think the collision should be. Okay, so this does not have to be accurate. This is just representation. Like, if it barely fits, it's good enough. I can hold Alt and then click and drag to duplicate this, and I think this should be good enough, like for our purpose. And if I play this now, this should just work like as expected. So for assets, you need to look out for these things because the collision is something that you will face a lot of issues with. Like there is some weird collision all across this map because this was just for a quick demonstration purpose, and this was not made with like not designed to be played like how I'm doing right now. In any case, what I will do next is, before we can just quickly show that the asset that we have, like the modular kit, modular asset that we created, how to quickly set that up inside Unreal, like import it and set it up. So for Blender, we will see the export settings that we commonly use. So I'll just use this simple cube for now. Okay. So one thing you should know about is that uh, Unreal just treats like the world origin as the origin of the object. So let's say if your object is over here and world origin is over here, then inside Unreal, the pivot of this object will be, like this object will be very far from its pivot, and that causes a lot of issues. So what I will do is just move this around for now and set this to the world origins. Basically, you can just drag it. I just use some hotkeys to do that. But when I do this, you will see that this corner of this object is at the world origin. So this is where our pivot will be inside Unreal. Okay. So you should know that from Blender, like how to set this up. And this is the same thing for Maya as well. Okay, like Maya Max, whichever tool you use, you should ensure that your object is at the world origin. And then I'll click on Export FBX, and since this is a tie level asset, I actually already have some folders for us, but I'll just make a new. I'll call this tie level. And the usual export settings that we will use is, first of all, we'll name this. I'll call this SM underscore wall. SM is for static mesh, and this is a wall, and this is a 3 meter by 3 meter wall. So I'll just call it 3 by 3, and then underscore 001. So this is the naming convention that I use. You can like use whatever naming convention that your studio or whatever is preferred. Then I'll just do selected objects because then I want to only export the objects that are selected, and I only want to export mesh one. And one thing that you should know about is the orientation, axis orientation. So Unreal Engine uses an orientation in which x-axis is forward. So if I look at this, so this is the x-axis. X-axis is considered the forward axis. Y-axis is considered the right, okay, the right axis, and Z is up. If you have worked with Maya, you would know that in Maya it is minus, I think it's minus Z forward and Y up. So in Maya, the Y axis is actually pointing up. So if you are exporting from Maya and you do not, rotate or change your axis configuration, your asset will be, rotated in a weird way. But I'm telling for Blender. So what I'm going to do is for forward axis, I will just do X forward, and for up, it will be Z up. Okay, X forward and Z up. So this is the usual setting that usually we'll use, and then just do export. And then inside Unreal, it is very simple. All you have to do is just drag and drop it in your scene. Okay, so inside mesh, I'll just create a folder called as tile level or modular, and then right click and click on import. I'll just go to the folder where I exported the asset. Now the asset import is universal for all. This is universal setting for almost all kinds of asset that we use. What I'm going to do is just select this and click on open, and we will have to change a few things over here. Okay, so I'll click on advanced. One thing that I want is generate missing collision. Now, if you, some of those who know about Unreal, you might have heard of this word called as nanite. So what nanite does is it automatically manages LODs. But from what I have seen so far, like this is supposed to boost your performance, but this does not do too much for you. Okay, like if your asset is extremely high poly or extremely badly made, in that case nanite works. Otherwise, if your asset is already low poly, well optimized and well made, then nanite literally does not do too much for you. And also nanite is not supported on Android, it's only on PC platform. So it is something that you can decide to turn on, or you can just leave it. Okay. And the next thing that I want to uncheck is generate lightmap UVs, because we already did generate our own lightmap UVs in the previous session. Okay. And then I'll scroll down, uniform scale with 1. This is fine. Next thing is material. Now material we are going to set up on our own. So I'm just going to, on search location, I'm just going to select do not search. Import method will be do not create material, and import texture will be unchecked. Like these are on by default, we'll just uncheck all of that. Okay, and one more thing that I would like to, that I usually do, that is for modular assets, the vertex color import option. Like I said previously, we do have methods for vertex painting and all that, so we need to ensure that we override these settings. So vertex color import option, again, I know these are too many things, but something that you should know about, because eventually if you want to set up your scene inside Unreal and you do not know these settings, it will cause a lot of issues. So what I'm going to do is tell Unreal to override the vertex color, okay, with whatever setting I provide. So I'm going to say that everything should be black, so there should be no vertex color. So a value of 1 means there is a vertex color on that specific channel, and a value of 0 means there is no vertex color on that channel. Okay, so there are 4 color channels. I hope you know that any image has, like, it depends, it has ideally 3 channels, RGB channels, and additionally if your image has transparency, then it can have an alpha channel as well. So what I'm telling Unreal is that override all of that and make all of them 0. Then I'll click on OK. Yeah. Again, this is not something that we may see, but something that you should know about. Like, eventually, whenever you are working with any kind of situation like this, you should be aware about all these things. Let missing collision, this is checked by default. We are overriding the vertex colors, and we uncheck generate light map UVs because we did generate the light map UVs on our own. And finally, we do not want Unreal to create materials for us. And with that, I'll just click on import. Okay, and this throws a warning. I'm going to ignore that warning, and let's check this asset out. So I can double click on this to open the asset editor, and if you if we look at the collision, I'll click on simple collision, and Unreal has generated like proper collision for this one, so no issues there. So usually that is how you import your assets into Unreal. Next thing that I'll show is how to apply a material for this. Again, creating a material inside Unreal is, I won't say a lengthy or difficult process, but it involves certain things. Okay, so like you should know little bit about shaders, you know, shader maths. Not too much, just the basics. That is something that we may eventually see. But for now, what I'm going to do is, like, ideally, if you are using some kind of templates or ready-made assets, or even if you are using the starter content, so what I can do is click on add content, uh, not this one, content of feature pack, and in content there is the starter content. So starter content does come with lot of materials that you can use by default. Okay, so already ready-made things. I may already have it, so I will not import it, and also because I already have lot of materials. So what I'm going to do is just upload it on this one. Okay, so one thing that you should know about is the materials in Unreal. Okay, like whenever you bring in assets without any materials, it just looks like this. This is actually the default world grid material that Unreal assigns every asset that you bring in. Okay, so I hope I'm audible. I'm not sure if I'm having some kind of network issues, I believe. So I was saying that if you are using some kind of template, you should have some controls for the material that you know you are using. Otherwise, if you want to set them up on your own, it's a lengthy process and involves a lot of shader maths and all that. So that is something that if you want, you can learn. Otherwise, you know, it is something that you can skip as well. So as you can see, I'm trying to increase the tiling of this material. And there seems to be some kind of strange overlay on this. And let's just see what exactly it is. So this is what a material graph in Unreal Engine looks like. Okay, this is something that you, if you are interested, you can learn about all the shader maths and all that, but not something that you need to necessarily know. Okay, and I can see there is a world position attribute applied to this, and because of that there is some kind of overlay that is coming on our material. Okay. But I'm not going to change any of this too much because some other thing in my scene might break. So for now I'm just going to leave it as is, and what I will suggest is going to some website, like we have the polyheaven.com. Because this has a very nice collection of 3D models and textures. You can, you know, download, and all of this is absolutely free. Like if you might have already seen this website, I'm not sure, but this is something that you should know about. And apart from that, Unreal Engine 5 also comes with mega scans. Okay. So for that, we can access the Pixel Bridge. So we have two very nice resources for assets that you can possibly use. I am interested in the textures. So you can get, like, there is a huge library of free assets that you can access. This has like 527 textures, so there is a lot more than you can ask for. So what I'm going to do is just, show you the common download settings that we use for Unreal, because if you are downloading your assets from somewhere, you should know what all should be there. Okay. So I want 4K textures. So first setting is the resolution. So 4K, and next is the format in which this overall collection will come. If you do it in blend, like if you are using this for Blender, you can just go for blend. Otherwise, what I prefer is zip, because we can choose what all maps we want, we don't want other. So one thing that you will notice on this website is that there are a lot of random things selected, like certain maps will be on EXR, but ideally you should keep everything in one singular format. Okay, so I prefer PNG because this has opacity as well in case we want to store any kind of opacity setting. So the maps that we will need is AO, diffuse, displacement, normal, DX. So there are two types of normal maps, DX or DirectX, and GL or OpenGL. Okay, so like I'm not sure whether you have ever heard of these terms before or not, but there are three distinct render APIs that we use, again for your general knowledge and all that. So first is OpenGL, other one is DirectX, and the final one is Vulkan. Has any of you, by any chance, heard of any of these? Like if you play games, you might have heard of these at some point. Anyone else? Okay, I understand. Yeah. So OpenGL is actually the oldest render API, and it is something that is easily accessible. Like it is so easily accessible that if you want, you can write your renderer in OpenGL right now if you want. Your GPU should support OpenGL, like whichever GPU you use. So OpenGL is one of the APIs, and DirectX is nowadays most common. Okay, so not for everywhere because DirectX is Microsoft's graphic API. So this mostly works on Windows. But- And for iOS, there is the Metal API. So iOS and Mac systems, they use the Metal API, and this is again based out of OpenGL. So if you learn OpenGL, you will have basic idea how Metal works. And the latest one is Vulkan, and I believe this was developed by the uh, Asus. Like you may have heard of Asus or Asus, whatever you want to call it. They developed the Vulkan API and they gave it freely to the something called as the Kronos group. Okay. Again, these are GK things, something that you may want to know, you may not want to know, up to you. So Kronos Group is the conglomerate of all the GPU and hardware manufacturers. They come together and set up these specifications for having a common render pipeline to be shared among all of them. Okay, like if you Google search Kronos Group, you will know more about them. So all the API specifications are decided by the Kronos Group. How it's supposed to work, what kind of uh, functions or things they should possibly have. So here Unreal Engine uses the DirectX normal map format for rendering. Okay. And if you are doing for Unity, you will want the OpenGL format, okay, because Unity by default uses the OpenGL normal map format. And for Maya as well, it's going to be OpenGL format. And for Blender, again, rendering is in Blender is not something that I do very frequently. So I cannot 100% say which format is used inside Blender, but I believe it is DirectX. But yeah, for Unreal Engine, you will need the DirectX normal map format. Okay. Now the primary difference between them is very small. Like uh, it's just the direction of the y-axis for the normal map that is flipped. Like you can manually flip that if you want to. Anyway, so DirectX and finally the roughness. Okay. So once again, AO or ambient occlusion, diffuse, displacement, DirectX, normal, and roughness. These are the maps that we will require, you know, for any kind of scene that we set up. And usually, if you are using any kind of like uh, library such as Quixel, it has the settings which will automatically set all of these for you. I hope this okay. This logged me out. Not sure why this thing keeps logging me out, but okay. Anyway, so I'm not going to use the mega scans for now. But what I will suggest is you can check out the Polyheaven website and you can check out their library of textures. And you can try creating something on there. And I'll just quickly show that how you can import any of this. I already have certain textures downloaded because I don't want to waste time downloading things right now. I'll just close off Quixel. I'll just quickly import some textures and quickly set up something. Okay. So let's see where the textures are kept. I'm just going to, for the sake of organization, I'll create a folder. All this, let's just call this wall. And I believe it is in resources, textures, brick wall. Okay. So I have the diffuse, displacement, DirectX normal, and roughness. And AO. So these are the five maps that we need. Another thing that we may talk about is the texture packing or channel packing. Okay, that is something that if you want we can cover. Otherwise, you know, it's not for everyone. It is something related to optimization. Okay. Once I have the textures downloaded, what I'm going to do is just right click on this and then do create material. Okay, like I just right click on the brick wall, or what I can other thing that I can do is I can right click and just create a material. Okay, I'll call this m underscore high level base, some anything that you want. I'll just open this up, open my content browser and just drag in all the five textures that we downloaded. Again, this will be the most basic setup without any additional things. Usually material setup inside Unreal requires a lot more work than just dragging the texture nodes in here. But for the sake of simplicity, what I'm going to do is just start connecting all the maps. So we have the base color, the normal. I mean, this is general for any tool that you use. And this one is supposed to be roughness. So this will be the roughness. This one is this one is supposed to be the displacement. Now displacement will keep aside for now. It is not something that I'm going to use directly as of right now. and final one is the ambient occlusion. So this will go into the ambient occlusion. Okay, and I'll just click on save. And before we apply anything, we just what we do is just right click on the material and then click on create material instance. We don't apply the master material to anything, we create an instance out of it first. Again, something that you should keep in mind. I'll just call this inst underscore world and drag and drop it on this. And you will see this has a very strange color. So in order to tweak all that, we do have to create some additional things. Again, if you are interested, you can note down what we are doing here. Otherwise, I'm just going to do this really quickly because this does not look too good to me. I'll just convert this to parameter, call this tint, and then do a multiply. Okay, and by default, like if you like all of you have studied mathematics, so if we want to multiply a number with something and make sure that its value doesn't change, so for that we multiply with 1. If you multiply with 1, then the number that was multiplied won't change. So I'll just make everything 1 here, so that with this multiplication nothing changes, so that any final color we apply is intentional. So if I take the inst wall now, I'll just enable the tint, and now I can you know, try to get the color that I want. Okay. And one final thing, if you remember, like in Blender, when we were setting this up, we made sure that the tile level unwrap is on the second UV channel, not on the first one. So in order to make this tile level, we need to ensure that we are targeting the correct UV channel. So for that, I'll make one last small change to this material, and that is passing a texture coordinate to this. So this texture coordinate mode will allow us to target a specific UV channel. Okay. So I'm going to make this coordinate index as 1. Like I said in Unreal, the first index is 0, second is 1, and so on. So I'm passing a coordinate index of 1, and I'll just connect this to UV for all the texture maps that we have. And once we have saved this, you will see this has changed because now this is targeting the correct UV channel, and our asset is properly tileable. One thing that we may want is control few more parameters, like intensify the normals. Right now the normals are not you know intense, they are very flat, so we may eventually want to change that. But so far, like this one might we might have gone a bit too fast. So let me know if you know there is something that you have question or anything like that, like how we did something or why we did. There is also texture packing, but it's not something that I want to cover right now because I believe that will be too much. Okay, sir. Okay. Okay. Sure, sir. Okay, sir. We can do that.